Know your place, you cheap, pathetic trash!
You just poured water on the owner's mother.
The glass hit my mother's face before it hit the floor. Water ran through her gray hair, down the blue dress she'd ironed twice that afternoon, and pooled around her shoes while 300 people in tailored suits went silent. And my wife stood over her with an empty smile. Like humiliating an old woman in the middle of a company party was the most natural thing in the world. If stories like this hit you in the chest, subscribe, like the video, and tell me where you're watching from before we begin. Because what happened next didn't just end a marriage. It exposed every ugly truth hiding behind it. My mother blinked through the water. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just stood there trembling, one hand still clutching the little gift bag she had brought for my wife, the tissue paper now soaked and hanging over her fingers like wilted petals. "Vanessa," I heard myself say, but it came out low, almost broken. Vanessa turned to me with that same polished smile she used in meetings when she wanted to look innocent. "Don't start, Noah. She embarrassed me in front of everyone." My mother looked from her to me, confused, humiliated, trying to understand what crime she had just committed. "She sat at the executive table," Vanessa snapped, loud enough for the whole ballroom. "She touched the reserved place cards. She was asking people if she could take pictures near the stage. What did you expect me to do?" My mother's lips parted. "I only sat there because the young man at the door said this invitation was for—" "That invitation was not for you," Vanessa cut in. "It was for family," I said. She swung toward me. "Exactly. Family that knows how to behave." Something cold moved through my chest. Not anger yet, not even shock. Something worse. Recognition. Because when a person finally shows you the truth without trying to hide it, the pain is sharper than any betrayal you suspected. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around my mother's shoulders. Her fingers clung to my wrist. "Baby," she whispered, voice shaking, "don't make this bigger. I'm fine." She wasn't fine. There was mascara bleeding under her eyes. Her hair was plastered to her temple. Her lower lip was trembling so hard she had to bite it to stop. And still she was trying to protect me. Always me. Behind us, the string quartet had stopped playing. The host near the stage was frozen, microphone still in hand. Conversations had collapsed into murmurs. Every face in the ballroom had turned toward us. Vanessa noticed the attention and did what people like her always do when shame starts pointing back at them. She doubled down. "She should leave," Vanessa said. "Both of you should, before security gets involved." I slowly stood up. "You want security?" I asked. She folded her arms. "Don't do that voice with me. You knew how important tonight was." Important. That word almost made me laugh. Tonight was important, yes, just not for the reason she thought. At the far end of the ballroom, I saw Graham Cole, overacting CEO, start moving toward us with 2 board members behind him. His face had already changed. He had seen enough from across the room to know something had gone very wrong. Vanessa saw him too, and her whole posture shifted. Perfect shoulders, chin lifted, wounded expression. "Good," she said under her breath. "Let him see what kind of scene your family creates." Graham got within a few feet of us and stopped. He didn't look at Vanessa first. He looked at me. There was a question in his eyes. "Do you want me to step in?" I gave him the smallest shake of my head. "Not yet." It lasted half a second, but Graham understood. He turned to Vanessa and spoke carefully. "Is there a problem here?" Vanessa exhaled like a victim relieved to be rescued. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole. This is personal. My husband and his mother have a way of making everything difficult." My mother lowered her eyes. I felt her flinch at the word difficult. Graham's jaw tightened. He knew exactly who my mother was. He also knew what tonight had originally been planned to celebrate. But he waited. He played along. "Do you need assistance?" he asked. Vanessa nodded toward my mother like she was pointing at spilled trash. "Yes, please have someone escort them out." You could hear the air leave the room. Even the board members behind Graham looked stunned now. But before anyone moved, my mother touched my arm again. "Noah," she whispered, "please, let me go home." Home. 2 bus rides away. Back to the little apartment where she still kept the kitchen light on, whenever I worked late because she said the world felt colder when your child came home to darkness. I looked at her wet dress, the cheap hem she had sewn by hand because she didn't want to spend money on alterations. I looked at the ruined gift bag. I looked at my wife. And suddenly, I was back 7 years earlier in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and metal, listening to my mother apologize for not being able to afford the textbooks I needed for my final semester. She had taken off her wedding ring that night, the only gold she had left from a marriage that had given her more bruises than memories. She set it in my palm and said, "Take it. Build something with your life so this family line ends with you standing tall." I sold that ring 3 days later. It bought the first 2 used scanners and a dying forklift battery. That became the first month of Northline. That became every warehouse, every contract, every truck, every branch. That became the company hosting this party. And the woman my wife had just drenched like garbage was the reason any of it existed. Vanessa still didn't know. Not because I had lied to her about my name, not because I had built some elaborate fake life, but because from the moment she decided I was beneath her, she stopped looking closely at anything about me that didn't serve her. She knew I worked long hours. She knew I dressed simply. She knew I drove the same old pickup I'd had since the first warehouse. She knew I hated flashing money. She knew I sent money to my mother every month, even though she pretended not to need it. And she knew I had recently taken a field operations role inside Northline to study problems from the ground up. What she never cared enough to ask was why the acting CEO always answered my late-night calls, or why my employee badge didn't have a department color, or why the founder photo on the company's internal site had no full face, only an old side profile under the name N. Reyes. She never asked because in her mind she had already solved me. Not rich, not useful, temporary. Graham stepped closer. "Noah," he said carefully, "perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere private." Vanessa turned so fast I almost heard the panic in her neck. "Why are you talking to him like that?" Graham ignored her. I looked at my mother. "Come with me." Vanessa laughed once. Sharp, nervous. "Oh, now you want to act important?" I should have answered then. I should have ended it with one sentence. But pain has a strange way of making you patient. And some truths land harder when the person who caused them has nowhere left to hide. So I took my mother to the women's lounge near the ballroom and stood outside while an older attendant brought her towels. Through the cracked door, I heard my mother crying as softly as a person can cry when she is trying not to break in public. That sound did something to me no anger ever could. It made me still. It made me dangerous. A minute later, she called me in. She had dried her face. Her hair was still damp, curling at the ends. The blue dress was darker now, clinging to her shoulders. She looked so small sitting on that velvet bench. "Sit," she said. I knelt in front of her instead. Her eyes searched mine. "Don't do anything you'll regret." "I regret bringing you here." "No," she swallowed. "You regret loving someone who wanted your shine, not your soul." That hit harder than the water. I looked down. She reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope, now slightly bent. This fell out of Vanessa's bag when she threw the water. I picked it up before anyone stepped on it. I took it. My name was on the front. I opened it. Divorce papers. Already signed. My throat closed so hard I couldn't breathe for a second. At the bottom was a handwritten note in Vanessa's tight, slanted script. After tonight, this is cleaner for both of us. Don't make it ugly. For both of us. Like I was some stain she planned to remove after securing whatever future she thought was waiting for her at this party. My mother watched my face crumble, and I hated that she had to witness that too. "There's more," she said quietly. I looked up. She hesitated, then forced the words out. "I came early. I was looking for the right room, and I heard Vanessa talking near the terrace, with that tall man from television screens in your office, the one with the silver tie. Trevor Lyle, Chief Strategy Officer, board candidate, too smooth to trust, too ambitious to ignore." "What did she say?" I asked. My mother gripped her purse tighter. "She said once tonight was over, she'd finally be free of the warehouse husband and his charity case mother. She said after the promotion, she wouldn't have to keep pretending." For a second, the room tilted. Not because I was surprised, because some part of me had spent the last year collecting small injuries and still hoping they didn't add up to this. Vanessa hiding our marriage at work. Vanessa introducing me at a dinner once as someone from my past. Vanessa asking me not to come to company events because she said spouses ruined momentum. Vanessa rolling her eyes when my mother called. Vanessa telling me I had small money habits whenever I chose practicality over show. I had seen every red flag and kept painting over it with history, chemistry, memory, hope. My mother touched my cheek the way she used to when I was a boy trying not to cry after fights at school. "Listen to me," she said. "When a woman is ashamed of your mother, she is ashamed of the boy you once were. Never stay where your younger self would feel unwanted." That nearly broke me, because suddenly I wasn't 37, kneeling in an upscale restroom in a tailored suit. I was 19 again, watching my mother count coins for groceries and pretend she wasn't hungry so I could eat. And all I could think was this: she survived too much for me to let anyone make her feel small. I stood. My hand tightened around the divorce papers until the edges cut into my palm. "No more," I said. When we walked back into the ballroom, people straightened like they'd been holding their breath the whole time. Vanessa was near the stage now, whispering urgently to Trevor Lyle. The moment she saw me, she dismissed him and hurried over with a face full of panic disguised as concern. "Noah," she said softly, reaching for my arm. "I think we both need to calm down." I looked at her hand until she dropped it. That was the first crack in her confidence. "You humiliated my mother," I said. She glanced around. "Please lower your voice." "Why?" "Because this can still be fixed." Fixed. Like it was a stain on her reputation, not blood on the inside of my chest. She leaned closer. "I was under pressure. Trevor was about to introduce me to 2 board members. Your mother walked into the VIP area looking careful." She took a breath, recalculated, then tried a different mask. "I didn't know she was your mother when she sat down there." My mother was standing right beside me. Vanessa knew exactly how pathetic that lie sounded the second it left her mouth, so she pivoted again. "I just reacted badly, okay? I was embarrassed." By an old woman in a blue dress? By what she represented tonight. There it was. The truth, finally too impatient to stay hidden. I stared at her. She lifted her chin, desperate enough now to say the ugliest part out loud. You don't understand how hard I work to get people in this room to take me seriously, she whispered. They judge everything. The husband, the family, the background. If they think I come attached to... Her eyes flicked to my mother's worn shoes. They won't see me the same. My mother inhaled sharply. I felt my whole body go cold. Not hot, not explosive. Cold. Because cruelty dressed as ambition is its own kind of disease. You married me, I said. Vanessa's expression hardened. I married the man you said you were becoming. I almost smiled. No, I said. You married the man you thought would worship you while you climbed over him. Before she could answer, the host on stage cleared his throat. His hands were shaking around the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice tight, if I could have your attention for just a moment. Graham had taken the stage. The room quieted instantly. Vanessa turned, relieved. She really thought this was going to save her. Graham looked over the ballroom, then directly at me. Tonight, he said, was meant to mark Northline's 15th year. Most of you know the story we tell publicly. A young man starts with one failing warehouse and a loan nobody believed he could repay. He paused. But that story has always been incomplete. The giant screen behind him flickered to life. A photo appeared. An old warehouse, a rusty forklift, and a younger version of me in work boots standing beside my mother while she held a lunch container against her chest and smiled like I had hung the moon. The entire ballroom went dead silent. Vanessa stopped breathing. Trevor took one step backward. Graham's voice carried through the room, steady and clear. Northline exists because one woman cleaned office buildings at night, skipped meals, sold her wedding ring, and handed her son the last proof that her life had ever included anything valuable, so he could build a future bigger than pain. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. This company exists because that son kept his promise. Then Graham said the words that changed the air in the room. Our founder, owner, and chairman, Nathaniel Noah Reyes. The room erupted, not in chaos, in shock. People turned, chairs scraped. A few executives actually stood. I saw recognition dawning in faces that had only ever known me through calls, memos, strategy reviews, or old photos without context. Vanessa looked at me as if her brain had rejected reality. No, she whispered. I didn't move, didn't rescue her from it, didn't soften it. On the screen, another photo appeared. My first truck. My first contract team. My mother asleep in a plastic chair at the warehouse office while I worked through the night with a blanket over her shoulders. Then one final slide. Tonight's program. Private recognition dinner honoring Elena Reyes, the first investor in Northline. My mother's knees almost buckled. She stared at the screen, then at me. You told me this was just a party, she whispered. I smiled through a throat full of fire. I wanted to surprise you. She started crying again, this time not from shame. Vanessa grabbed my sleeve hard enough to wrinkle the fabric. You knew? She said. You knew this whole time what tonight was? Yes. And you let me... I let you be yourself. She let go like my arm had burned her. "Noah, listen to me," she said, voice falling apart now. "I didn't know. If I had known—" I turned to her slowly. That's exactly the problem. Her face drained. Around us, nobody was pretending not to listen anymore. Trevor began edging toward the side exit, but Graham's voice stopped him. "Mr. Lyle, don't leave yet. Compliance would like a word." Trevor froze. That drew every eye in the room toward him. Graham continued, calm as a knife. "During the last 11 months, Mr. Reyes has been working across Northline sites anonymously to evaluate leadership culture from the ground up. That review uncovered several issues, including executive misconduct, falsified expense chains, retaliatory staffing proposals, and a private arrangement between Mr. Lyle and Vanessa Hale involving promises promotion in exchange for confidential client access." Vanessa made a small sound in the back of her throat. Not denial. Panic. Trevor snapped, "This is outrageous!" "It's documented," Graham said. The room exploded into whispers. Vanessa turned back to me, horrified now in a way that finally looked real. "Noah, I didn't—" "You hid our marriage," I said. Tears filled her eyes. "Because image matters in corporate culture. You called my mother a charity case." She shook her head wildly. "I was upset. You filed divorce papers before tonight." She looked at the envelope in my hand, and her shoulders collapsed. It was over. She knew it. But even then, even standing in the ashes of her own choices, she had one more chance to show remorse. One. And she wasted it. She looked past me at my mother and said, with a bitterness so naked it made people near us recoil, "If she hadn't inserted herself where she didn't belong, none of this would have happened." That was it. That was the last door closing. My mother straightened beside me, still damp, still shaking, still more dignified than anyone else in the room. I stepped toward Vanessa. Not threatening, not loud, just certain. "Do you know what that woman did the year I started Northline?" I asked. Vanessa said nothing. She worked 12-hour shifts cleaning surgical floors with a slipped disc because I couldn't afford payroll. My voice carried farther than I intended. Nobody looked away. She ate crackers for dinner for 3 months and told me she was trying a new diet so I wouldn't know she'd given her grocery money to my business. Vanessa's mouth trembled. When the bank laughed at me, she took off her wedding ring and told me to pawn the last symbol of a man who broke her, because in her words, pain should at least be useful. My mother was crying openly now. "So no," I said, "she did not insert herself where she didn't belong. She belongs in every brick of this company, in every paycheck, every warehouse light, every truck on the road. You poured water on the foundation of Northline." Silence. Pure, crushing silence. Then I looked at HR, who was already standing with security. "Ms. Hale's employment is terminated effective immediately," I said. "Revoke access, suspend all equity considerations, and make sure the staff she retaliated against are reinstated pending review." Vanessa gasped. "Noah, please." I kept going. "As for the divorce," I said, lifting the signed papers, "thank you for saving my attorney the printing." A few people flinched. One board member looked down to hide a smile. Vanessa's tears spilled now, fast and ugly. She reached for me again, but my mother stepped between us. That was the part I will never forget. Not the reveal, not the silence, not even the look on Vanessa's face. It was my mother, still wet from humiliation, still trembling, standing there like a wall between me and the woman who had wounded us both. She looked at Vanessa with sadness, not hate. and that somehow made it worse. "You were never too good for my son," my mother said softly. "You were just too empty to recognize a good man when you had one." Vanessa broke. She covered her mouth and sobbed, but even that sound didn't move me anymore. Because grief can survive betrayal. Love can even survive betrayal for a while. But once respect dies, the body is still standing long after the soul has left. Security stepped forward. Vanessa looked at me one last time like she was waiting for me to stop it. I didn't. Trevor was escorted out first, pale and raging. Then Vanessa, heels unsteady, mascara running, the ballroom parting around her like water around a sinking thing. Nobody defended her. Nobody followed. When the doors closed behind them, the room stayed still. Graham stepped down from the stage and came to my mother. Then, in front of the entire company, our CEO bent slightly and said, "Mrs. Reyes, I am so deeply sorry." My mother shook her head through tears. "This is not your fault." "No," I said quietly. "But what happens next is ours." I held out my hand to her. "Come on, Ma." She stared at it. "I look a mess." I smiled. "You look like the woman who built an empire and still took the bus to get here." That made her laugh through the tears. The whole room softened. Together we walked to the stage. And something I never expected happened. People stood. One by one at first, then row after row. Warehouse supervisors, account managers, drivers, executives, reception staff, board members, all of them on their feet, applauding her. Not me. Her. My mother shook so hard I had to hold her elbow as we reached the microphone. She looked out at that room like she had accidentally entered someone else's dream. Then she leaned toward the mic and said the simplest thing in the world. "I didn't know any of this was planned," she said, voice trembling. "I only came because I thought family should clap for family." That hit the room harder than any speech I could have given. She glanced at me, and I saw pride in her face for the first time that night, without a single shadow of shame attached to it. Then she looked back at the crowd. "My son was never poor," she said, "not where it mattered. He was rich in loyalty, rich in heart, rich enough to keep helping people who never earned it." She paused, and you could have heard a breath fall. "But tonight taught me something. If someone can only see your worth when they discover your title, then they were blind long before they met you." No one moved. No one spoke. It just settled over the room like truth always does when it arrives too clean to argue with. I kissed the top of her head, and for the first time all night, the pain in my chest made room for something else. Peace. Not because Vanessa was gone, not because everyone knew who I was, but because the one person who had been humiliated in that room walked out honored. And some endings are not about revenge, they're about restoration. Later, when the ballroom had emptied and the staff had begun clearing glasses, my mother and I stood by the stage together. She took my hand and squeezed it. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at the wet hem of her blue dress, at the lights dimming over the tables, at the place where my marriage had ended and my mother's dignity had been returned. Then I told her the only thing that felt true. "She poured water on the wrong woman," I said, "because she never understood that everything I own began in your hands." Tell me honestly, after what she did, would you have forgiven her?